about meditation, but not actually teach them. Teaching meditation can be really easy. I can just have them like, okay, everyone sit down, rock side to side on your chair, rock front and back, find your balance point, take a deep breath, and breathe. That way, that's easy. But doing the presentation is harder, so I have to practice it. So far, every day, I'm doing something to learn to prep for that thing, even if it's only 10 minutes. You know?
And also, if you guys haven't started your teacher assisting yet, it really does help so much.
Yeah.
And shadowing?
Yeah, it's such a difference.
Suki
And
did one already.
I just realized that today I realized I have 2 left, but I haven't observed or teacher shadowed the flow set class, so now I'm going to start
Doing that.
that's
observing
Wednesday,
that,
yeah.
that would be really helpful.
Wednesday and Sunday, I'm
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah, you guys can also, by the way, you could shadow the Sunday if you wanted. Because Sunday I've been doing
Should've done that
a
today.
version of this set. Actually, today I stuck verbatim to the sequence.
You were
Last week I didn't stick to the set verbatim because remember that week before it was about learning to integrate your own sequencing. So I was just showing you another way to integrate. So I basically took this set and I turned it into a pulse set. Did you guys notice that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was the thing. And then, so the printed set that you have is a slightly modified version. Go by the verbatim set that I shared with you, okay? I have actually even a 90-minute set of this sequence, too. But I don't want to give it to you right now because you guys got enough work. Right? But I do have a 90-minute set. If you're
really?
interested, yeah. As a matter of fact, I have about 150 audio programs. Yeah. On my computer. Okay. So we're going to go back to, so we just did our practicum. And this one is actually, so we talked about the inner experience, right? We talked about kind of grounding and meditation last week, right? We talked a little bit about samsara. Remember, we had that whole discussion about the dragon chasing its tail, right? So that's the idea of samsara. And now this one is about, so this takes us into a whole concept of really it's a reflection on our society and what our society seems to, I'll just read it verbatim. The idea of the future and bliss postponement in our society. So the idea of the future and bliss postponement in our society. We are very much a society of there's always the next thing. We are a society of postponement of bliss, postponement of awakened consciousness. Because even in the yoga field, I found, much to my dismay, that it's almost written into the whole concept of yoga and the idea of you'll only be enlightened when you have gray hair and you've been doing yoga for 20 years or whatever it is. And I've got gray hair and I've been doing yoga for 20 years. And I can tell you that it didn't really matter because I have a lot of friends now that are my age, almost grandfather age. I have friends that are grandparents, that are my age and younger than me, actually, peers of mine that I grew up with. If you always are looking for the next thing, then you're not really in a state of gratitude. You're not in a state of happiness. You're not in a happening. Right? You're always wanting to be something else. I think that it's innate for us as Western thinkers, but in the East, it's not always that way. There were many people that I met. Now, another interesting thing too about traveling in the East, they didn't have a lot of money like in India, for instance, comparatively, and even Thailand for that matter, but there was a lot of happiness. Like I saw a lot of people joking around in the streets, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of deep like friendship, a lot of other forms of wealth versus what our society says. Like what our society is, you can relax when you're, I think like, and again, now this is a general idea, but we almost put down people that are relaxing. You know what I mean? Oh, don't get influenced by so-and-so, he's a deadbeat. Or, don't rest on your laurels, right? I mean, have you heard that term before? The problem is that even if you start a pattern, what is set in motion will stay in motion, right? What you are patterned as a little kid is often going to stay in motion through your adult life and to the end. To the end. The practice of yoga is a journey without distance, ultimately. It's saying, don't think that it's about getting this thing done, but rather it's the whole process along the way. That if you think that you're going to be, let's say, fulfilled only when you have your house and your car and your family and all of those things, remember that the feeling of enlightened awareness and fulfillment is a feeling, right? It's not a thing outside of your beingness. Correct? I mean, I'm just saying like scientifically. The idea of enlightened consciousness and fulfillment and samadhi, the eighth limb of yoga, the feeling of oneness, it is a feeling. It's an emotion, isn't it? I think we would all agree. So it's not attached to anything on the outside world, if that's true, right? It's not attached to getting anything done in the end. Because you can keep in this samsaric wheel, the hamster wheel of life, till you are old and gray. And it's funny for me because now I'm fully gray. And I'm saying the thing, because I remember being a kid and like looking at my wise old teacher. One of them specifically looked the part, Guru Singh. And he looked like a wizard. Like I remember he had long, like a white, gray beard and like gray long hair, but he tied it up because he was a Sikh, so he had but he really looked like this like older, smart, wise guy. And I remember when I was like 22 or something, 23, and I remember seeing him and saying, man, when I'm like that, like when I can, one of the things that blew me away about him was he didn't use notes. He could just talk he could give lectures on topics with no notes for like a half hour straight, consistently, forever, I thought. I don't know whether it's true or not, but the image of him. And then I remember thinking, like, when I get to that point, that's when I'm going to have, like, this idea of yoga down. That is no different. That's like a spiritual hamster wheel that you can get on as well. Yoga is a straight path to, it bypasses a lot of the things that society tells us, that we'll only be able to be at peace when we get an A. How many of you have gotten an A on a report card? Right? All of you, right? Now, did it change your life forever? Not really, right? I mean, you felt great for how long? I'm just curious. Like, how long did you feel great when you first saw the A?
Just that moment.
That moment. And it felt great, right? So there's no denying it feels great.
And then
Right?
you get a C and you're depressed in that moment.
In that moment, right? But then you got an A. How long did it last for you?
Well, I like only got A's.
All throughout? Okay. But then you graduated, right?
Yeah.
So like when you got your last A, how long did that
Well,
last?
it sort of is like what you were talking about earlier. I was thinking about, I forgot what you were saying, but just kind of the feeling like when you're at the end of college, like the end, like being done with college was like a really uncomfortable time for me because I think I was like always used to like having a bar to hit and like hitting it, and then and then it's like when there's no like bar anymore, like measurement, then it's like you have to figure it out yourself and like how to derive like your own sense of that.
Yeah, and so when you do get the A, like for me, whatever, I mean, like let's just say for me, my last one was when I passed my yoga teacher, probably the last test. No, actually, I studied at Goldman Sachs and I got the certificate of, it was like a mastermind program of how to do, oddly enough, and here I am, not my age, but I was like in my 40s at the time. And I remember I got the certificate of completion, and like you get that thing, and it felt great. I remember for like, whatever, 10 minutes, let's say, I was like riding high because I got the certificate. I was like, ooh, I got the certificate. But it only lasts a certain amount of time, and then you're back to yourself. You're back with your consciousness again, right? So this teaching of yoga, the body of teaching we call, I don't want to say Vedanta because it's beyond Vedanta now. There's this body of even like physical experiential meditation practice. It's more Unitarian. It's not really, it's sort of taken on its own. And even the Vedanta philosophers and scholars would agree that the yoga we're now doing in the West has very little to do with what early Vedanta was teaching. And that's totally true, and that's okay. That's what's supposed to happen with yoga right now, for whatever reason, because it is. But because all of these things are really about an emotion, the yogis are coming along and we're saying, look, all of those are fleeting moments, but practice is something that, yes, you can actually go direct to the emotion. And it's not tied, your self-worth is never tied to whether you did get the A exam or like your happiness, whether you're married or not married, or have kids or not, or whatever. Because it is true, as somebody, I have all of those things now. And I was teaching this the same before I had them because I knew even when I didn't have all those things. But look, as somebody, I'll be 50 this week on Wednesday. I have a car, a house, 2 kids, and a wife, right? I'm married. On paper, I have all of those things now. And I can tell you that yes, okay, it feels okay, but it's an interesting thing as being human that it doesn't really matter. Like, that doesn't necessarily define whether I'm feeling a certain way or not. Like, what should I do now? Should I just quit? I could, I guess, right? Because I've done all the things. But you know what? There's another thing. There's still another thing left over. That's still, if I want to dig deep enough.
You have to raise your kids now. You're in that for life.
Right. Right, but and then the closer thing is I have to like sell my house now because I feel like, well, I've already made it worth this much or whatever, so I feel like, well, I don't really have true wealth because I have an asset, but it has not come to fruition. It has not sold yet. So that's the latest thing, because my house is now on the market. But as part of my idea about yoga and about like the philosophy of life, is that there's always a next thing. Like my wife was saying to me the other day, well, when we can get our stuff out of storage and just moved into our house. then we can finally relax. And I was like, no, because there's going to be another thing, right? Isn't it? Always, right? Isn't there always a sequel? And if it's about just getting everything done, then the best concert that you could ever imagine would be a one-note concert. You'd walk in, and Odessa would be playing, but they'd all hit one pad, or one note, or one thing, and then leave. You got it done. It was fast. But it's not about that, right? And I said it I'll say it again and again too. This is a musical thing, and you're supposed to dance, right? You are here to learn and experience these experiences, and sometimes enjoy them, and sometimes succumb to the challenges of them, and sometimes you're going to feel great when you get the A, and sometimes you're not going to feel great when you get a D or an F for that matter. But your soul and your consciousness is supposed to remain constant. Okay? So, though you'll feel the fluctuations of life, and sometimes you will be caught in the storm. And one of my friends said it to me, who's a student who's also a teacher of mine, because it does sometimes flips around like that. It'll go back and forth. I teach him yoga, he teaches me business, and sometimes it goes the other way, and then I have to remind him to enjoy life because he's a business guy and I'm a yogi, and then he'll, kind of flips back and forth. But he's basically gets caught up in the business side of life, and so I will tell him, hey, you've got to chill out on your stress levels, because now he's suing people. He's gotten really into it. When you really get into the rat race, you end up having lawsuits and all this crazy, really complicated thing that he's doing right now. And it's supposed to be, and he said to me, so just to tie it, to bring it back home, he said to me that as somebody who teaches equanimity amidst intensity, right? Because I say that the physical yoga practice when you're in a hard pose is the practice of equanimity amidst intensity. And the practice of being calm while being in an intense situation. So you're in a hard pose, right? And you're and then you kind of, so you're practicing that calmness, but you're still in an intense pose. As a teacher of that, don't you think life will throw into your path intense situations, right? Because that's the karma of the lessons and the teachings that you are teaching, right? And I said, yes, you're right. That's exactly right. That's what life is going to always be, probably. Right? And this brings me back to Vedanta. So I'll go back to East Indian just to really tie it back to true yogic principles. Because I try to keep these things a little bit of opinion and life experience, but I also try to keep my lectures on point with East Indian ideology too, because it does have its roots, as far away as I just said it is. It does have its roots in Eastern Indian ideology. And I'm going to abridge it a little bit, but basically, there's a student and his teacher. And the student says, hey, I want you to practice in this game. And I want you to go into this cave and practice with a Gandharva. Okay, so a Gandharva is and again, I'm not going to quote it verbatim because my memory isn't verbatim to the story, but I'm going to quote the spirit of the story. And I want you to practice in this game against the Gandharva in the cave. And when you think you have learned and you're winning, then come back to me and tell me, hey, I'm winning right now. So he goes into the cave, and let's say the game is something let's just say it's soccer, but it'd probably be something more like high or cricket, because it's in India and cricket is more famous there. But let's just say the point is, it's a competitive game. So he goes in, and he's battling, and he's battling, and he's playing, and he's playing, and he's thinking he's winning, But he comes back to the teacher and he says, I think I'm winning, but I'm really he's all sweaty, like he's drenched like a yoga class. He's like covered in sweat. And he says, no, but you're struggling. You have to actually be calm, and you have to be like the winner. Look at the Gandharva. The Gandharva is not even breaking a sweat. They look at, he can see into the cave, and he's like, you're not winning. You think you're winning, but look, he's not even sweating. Go back. Go back in the cave and play again. So he goes back and he tries even harder, and he's trying and trying harder and harder, and he's sweating, and he sees the Gandharva is actually he's kind of losing points, but he's he's just smiling and laughing and hitting the ball. And so the student comes back, and he says, I'm winning, look. I'm winning on points. I have 9 and he has 7. And he's like, yeah, but the game's not over yet. Go back in, because look, the Gandharva's toying with you. He's not even sweating, and he's smiling. But you're sweating, and you're gritting your teeth, and you're clenching your jaw, and your muscles are tight, and your body's sore, and you're hurting. And so he sends him back in. And this goes on for years. The story is like this for a reason. It's back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth. And the teacher's getting older and gray, and the student's getting older, and his back is hurting, and he's playing, and he's coming back, and the teacher's finally, the younger student who's now getting older, is saying, I'm getting really old. I don't know if I don't think that this is going to work. I think whatever I say, he keeps on getting more points still. Now he's dancing in circles around me, still not breaking the sweat, and he's gaining points on me. And he says, who do you have me? Who is this evil Gandharva that I'm playing against? And he says, well, it's actually, that's death. That's who you're actually in competition with. And you, my friend, you are life. And that's sort of that's the end of that story, right? Because it's obviously, we all know that death is going to win in the end. So we may as well, while we're caught in this, because all of us are in the city, we're all in the grasp of samsara, right? Because we live in the city. We've chosen, from the East Indian ideology perspective, we are all in the rat race. We are also in that game, too, aren't we? Whether we like it or not, it is a karmic choice that we have all chosen, right? Because we've chosen to live our lives, all of us. But since that is our karma, and since the wise ones have shown us all of these different techniques, let's remember that it is a musical thing, and that we're supposed to enjoy the moments. And as we see so quickly, even with this teacher training, right, which is supposed to be tedious and stuff because we're learning, but it's for some reason these are not as tedious. I think the reason is because it is because it's more of an art form versus a mathematical academic thing. It goes by a little bit faster. But it will go by, our lives will go by so fast anyway. In the blink of time, right? Like my grandmother said when she was 101, she said it was like the blink of an eye. I remember your mom as a little daughter of mine. At that time my mom was like 70, 72 or something. I don't remember the exact age, 70, somewhere around there. So the postponement of bliss in our society is, while it is there for a reason, and obviously there's a balance, you can't just become a hedonistic party animal either, right? Well, you could, but then you would sacrifice what if you did that? What would you sacrifice? Huh?
Your health, your mental stability.
Your health.
And
Probably.
perhaps your longer term bliss.
Your longer term life, your lifespan, right? You'd probably, if you just party every day, like if everything is just a big party, you can't do that either, right? So what is it? So what do we have left? And what's the final answer to all of this topic?
Just be present and live peacefully.
Perhaps.
Balance.
And what else?
Balance.
And a balance, right? So we have what? The union of opposites, right? So we have Hatha Yoga. That's literally the definition of Hatha, means in English, literally sun-moon union, the balance of the two. And that when you get caught up in the storm, instead of fighting it, because that was one of the problems with that story could be taken many different ways, the Gandharva and the monk. But when we get caught up into the storm and we're really pulled into the vrittis, the whirlpools of life, then we realize that it is still a dance. And to be like as the saying goes, like dance with the challenge, right? Dance with the ripples that are going to come our way. If you're too rigid and stiff, you drown. The stiff and unbending will break, right? The soft and flexible will overcome. That's from the Tao Te Ching. That we as human beings, and especially in our current society, that whenever we think like, oh, well, when I get this thing finished, you know what really happens to most college students when they finish? They get stressed out, actually, right? Is that what? That's kind of what you said.
It was just kind of like I didn't mean to sound like obnoxious when I but like for the A thing, like it's just like my identity was always just being like so great at school and like just like having that, knowing that I was like always receiving that validation like through like the grades that I got and just like stuff like that. And then like I didn't have a job right when I graduated. And I decided to like go into the entertainment industry. So it was just kind of like this whole like weird moment where I was so lost without having like that structure of like I don't know. It's weird how different the structure is, and it's like there's this confidence that you have like at the end of college, or at least from my experience, that it's just like you can do anything, like the world is yours, like you're about to go like begin your life, and like you're like perfect. And then it's like you have a long way to go. Like the second you get into life, you're like at the bottom of the totem pole and like.
Mm-hmm. And it's called commencement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Isn't that the term they use?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what does commencement mean, right? Beginning. But you had spent 23 years of your life, or whatever, I'm rounding, but 23 years of your life to do what? To begin again, right? And so is the cycle of life, and even for us, like as human beings. Now, I don't know whether you guys believe, whether you all believe in reincarnation or not, but everything is like that. Like if you go into the reproduction, let's say, of even worlds that we know it, right? Even from a scientific perspective, right? We now know that this is true. The yogis have figured this out in some form too, but that the universe is expanding. Like we know that like the galaxies are expanding away from each other, right? We've learned that. And what that means is that most likely there actually was a Big Bang, right? Because we have scientific proof that everything's moving away from itself, right? The universe is expanding. Well, if it's expanding, it means it started at a point, right? Because it's doing this, right? It's exhaling, you could say. And if you think of just like the probability of, let's say, life existing on other planets, we know that there are more planets than there are sands on the beach, right? Because there are more stars, there are galaxies upon galaxies, and each galaxy has billions and billions of stars, right? And so, from a cosmic perspective, our planet is actually relatively in its like mid-throes of its existence, right? According to science. That according to like how old our sun is and the distances, and even if you took like, let's say it's 1 in a billion chance that another Earth-like planet existed, I promise I'll bring this home, and I promise that it will stay on topic. Even if there are billions, 1 in a billion chance, there still means that there are millions of Earth-like planets that exist, and that have existed in the past, right? And that will exist into the future, right? I mean, I'm just saying from a scientific perspective. And that we, right now, are an expression of already life forms that have existed in the past and will exist in the future. And that there is a chance that we are actually like, in the same way that we are born into this body as human beings, that we are also universes or galaxies are also in a reproductive phase at times as well, right? Because we know, for instance, the birth of a planet starts off as what? What does it start off as?
A star, right? Or
Right, kind of an explosion. Well, like a nebula explodes, and then the dust, the space dust, and then the dust somehow gathers, and then reproduction happens, right, of another solar system over time. Billions of years, but it does happen again, right? And it took, and we also, we grew out of this planet in our lives now and became souls in bodies after the reproduction from space dust. Literally, the molecules in your skin, you know, the water in your blood actually was in space before. This isn't my opinion either. Like, this is like science. I mean, I'm just saying, unless you're really into like Genesis or something, but I'm just stating the facts are that the iron in your blood was actually iron that was in space at one point. All of the molecules, that is your being, came from outer space. I mean, again, this is what we now know. So, this whole universe will begin again. And the reason I like to say this is because it puts things into perspective. However challenging your life is, and whatever phase of the life game that you're in, it will be a phase, including your whole life, and including the life of our sun, as in the sun salutation, Surya, sun god. That will also burn out, but that doesn't necessarily mean that your life will disappear either, because energy doesn't die, it just changes form. Again, science, not my opinion, right? This is a scientific fact. And so, both on the grandest, largest reproductive phase we can think of, which happens, right? Because we know that planets are formed like that, and galaxies are formed, and expand and will contract, so will our lives. And in the same way that when you finish college, it becomes a beginning again, and when you get your next job, you will begin again, and when you finally get your green card or citizenship, you'll think like, oh, then I can relax. No, you can relax now and observe all of that along the way, right? That's what this practice is reminding us, okay? It's a reminder of the expanse from the most macrocosmic ideas that we can think of, right? Because remember, did I give the Akashic Field lecture yet in this training or no? So just briefly, the Akashic Field is, now I don't know how the yogis thought of all of this stuff, but they did. They like documented all this interesting stuff. The Akashic Field is every thought that ever was. So imagine books. We'll do a little meditation on it. Every thought that ever was, off to the left. Every thought that is till this moment, this breath, take a deep breath. Every thought that ever was till this breath, and then every thought that ever will be into the future. All of that knowledge That is the Akashic field, or the Akashic files, they call them. Okay? Now, how they thought of that, it's already there. It always was, and it always will be. Okay? That's the amount of wisdom that exists in the universe, right? We are a part of that little sliver that we can even acknowledge that that even exists. We're a part of that knowledge. But the idea with when we are meditating is that we tap into those fields of knowledge, those levels of consciousness as yoga teachers. And that's why I was saying before when we were talking about ethics and stuff, that you don't go to your students' party and get all drunk and make a fool of yourself in front of you shouldn't do it anyway, but definitely not in front of your students, right? Why? Because you represent that consciousness. You're supposed to represent that consciousness. Does it mean you always will in every aspect of your life? Maybe, maybe not. But you are, in this field, you are supposed to represent that consciousness. And that's why students get so distraught when they see you all drunk at a party or something. That's why they're like, oh my God, are you kidding me? You know, Steve got drunk at a party. You won't see that, by the way. But I'm just saying, like, you might have maybe when I was really like a young teacher, but not, you won't see that, hopefully ever again. I don't want to say, I don't know, but you won't see that happen. So what we do have, and that's why we have all these little tools. So if there is all of that, and that bliss is present, so we, the yogis, come along and they do things like this. Take a deep breath. Your mind is wandering, your mind is thinking. So hear the sound. Take another deep breath. Exhale.